So again, I appreciate the invitation. Today I want to focus on today I want to focus on U.S.-Indian relations, and then tomorrow I will join Dean Kishore Mahbubani, who is actually my boss in Singapore, and we will discuss India as an emerging power or as a superpower. And my current book is really on the Indian military, what kind of military power India will be. So I will not talk about that today, but we'll talk about that tomorrow. Let me also say that Strobe Talbot, my present boss at Brookings, who comes to India regularly, has sends his best regards. And I will tell him what I've just learned yet today is that there's a serious IIT effort to have a think tank in India, or think tank about India. And if anybody knows about think tanks, it's Strobe Talbot. He's going to preside over Brookings' 100th anniversary very soon. We're the oldest, if not the largest, but we're certainly the oldest think tank in the United States. And in some ways, I think we're the most respected. So we can talk, maybe during Q&A time or later today or tomorrow, we can talk about that further. So what I want to do is really look back and then briefly and then look ahead. 40 years ago, when I first came to India as a graduate student, India was seen by Americans as a strange and exotic land, known only for its poverty and Mahatma Gandhi, if it was known at all. 30 years ago, India was seen as an economic basket case and an ally of the Soviet Union. 20 years ago, it was not seen at all. At the height of the Indian paranoia, I would use that word, that America was somehow trying to encircle or cut India down. In fact, the reality was worse, that American officials, American public didn't care about India, simply dismissed it out of hand. China was seen as the emerging rising country. 10 years ago, the changes were apparent. And I think they've turned out to be enduring. So I think the fundamental structure of India is changing, and the fundamental bases of the U.S.-India relationship are changing. When I joined Brookings 10 years ago, I wrote the first book about this phenomena, and I called India one of the most revolutionary states in the world. I won't go into the details, but India's society was changing, its economy was just beginning to change, its outlook on the world was changing. The Cold War was over, India had broken free of the Soviet Union, and it was really a revolutionary state, and still is a revolutionary state. What I want to do today is address three issues in this talk, all pertaining to trends in U.S.-Indian relationship. First, what are the long-term trends in the U.S.-Indian, what are the long-term U.S.-Indian trends? What is likely to happen to the new economic and political ties between America and India? Second, what will the Obama administration's approach to India be? Will it abandon the very pro-India policy of the Bush administration? Will it press India hard on Kashmir? Will it shift its attention to Pakistan or some other region or issues? Finally, I'll say a few words about the Mumbai catastrophe and how it might affect U.S.-Indian ties across the board. The immediate American reaction was shock. We watched that on television continuously, just as you did. It was an American national holiday when it happened, so all Americans got a good dose of what was going on in Mumbai. Direct live television. Will this help or hurt the U.S.-India relationship? So let me talk about long-term trends and where I see them going. In 1998 and 1989, there were three comprehensive studies of India-U.S. relations. One was by the Asia Society, one was by the Council on Foreign Relations, and the third was my own book on India, Emerging Power. And I think we could say that, looking at all three of them, the argument was that India had begun to change its economic policy. India was going to be a significant economic factor. Secondly, there was a new cultural, social relationship between the two countries, largely the large number of Indians who had migrated to the United States or worked in the United States or had been educated in the United States. And thirdly, the Cold War was over, and the two countries seemed to be groping for a strategic relationship of some sort. There was a vacuum. What would fill it? then about 5 years ago, I noticed that the atmospherics between Americans and Indians had also changed. In my book, I describe the typical U.S.-Indian seminar of foreign policy strategists, military experts, and they all began with 30 minutes to 2 hours of the alap, where both sides would get rid of all the grievances and bad memories of the past. So the first morning of every U.S.-India meeting was always wasted. In March, I was in Delhi with the same kind of people, former officials, some officials on both sides. And there was no alap. There was no throat clearing. We went right to business, and it was the most productive meeting I'd ever had with India. I'm also part of a National Academy of Science dialogue with the National Institute of Advanced Sciences in Bangalore. And we get down to business right away. Subjects such as terrorism, nuclear proliferation. There's no hesitation, no problem on either side in terms of a dialogue. So in a sense, the relationship has become normal, which to me, having lived through 40 years of bad relations, is abnormal. I can't get used to good things, but I'm pleased that it has happened. In fact, I wrote a book in 1979, and the title of the book was India Emergent Power ? When I wrote the new book, India Emerging Power, published in 1990-91, we took out the question mark. India still has some of the same problems, economy, Pakistan, a few other things, but really there's no question that this was a country on the move, and I'll talk more about that with Dean Mahbubani tomorrow. This audience knows better than I do what happened. Economic reforms took place in India. India's image as a poor, backward country was displaced by that of the country where the techies came from. And "Get me an Indian," the famous saying by the CEO of Sun Microsystems, became true. I mean, it was really quite and most of you have lived that. You know it better than I do. For me, the visible transformation was Dr. Sanjay Gupta, the TV doctor. And he sort of epitomized or symbolized the thousands and thousands of Indian doctors, engineers, professionals who are filling in American society and have now really become an important factor in U.S. politics and U.S. society. Now something has happened that I never would have predicted or expected. India's become a major manufacturing power. When I first came to India, anything made in India was, you just wouldn't look at it. And it reminded me of the years when I was a kid growing up in America, right after World War II. Anything made in Japan was seen as total trash. That changed, and I think the attitude towards Indian manufactured goods is changing also. In a sense, what we have to do now is deal with success. I won't go into the details, but business process outsourcing, the loss of American jobs to India, rivalry between Indian firms and American firms, Indian companies buying up American hotels and so forth. These are going to be issues. Perhaps more on the Democratic side than the Republican side. Democrats more concerned about labor and so forth. But these are issues that grow out of success. I could cite my own family. One of my sons owns a software company. He sells software to Indians. So a couple of Indian companies purchase his software. So in a sense, that's our revenge. Well, so to summarize, the new complementarity of our economies, the intermingling of our cultures and perspectives, and the gradual dissipation of stereotypes from the Cold War and earlier views of each other mean for me that the long-term trend in U.S.-Indian relations will be upward. We may oscillate up and down, but the long-term trend, secular trend, is upward. Now let me talk about more recent issues. Independent of these economic, cultural, and social trends, which are all positive, a new strategic relationship has begun to emerge. And those of you who follow these things, this is nothing new. But Clinton, beginning with Clinton, who liked India very much personally, but he had to sanction India in 1998 because of the nuclear tests.